Hey everybody, I'm Lindsay.
And that would make me Danny.
I'm going to start by giving you an overview of embedded analytics, and then most of the session will be Danny giving you some demos, and we'll end with a couple minutes for Q&A. So on one end of the spectrum, you can use our out-of-the-box BI product, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where you can use our APIs and our SDKs to build fully tailored experiences. And embedding is really somewhere in the middle. What's really incredible about embedding is that you get to take advantage of our pre-built dashboards and explorers, but in just a few steps, you get to help users make better decisions by surfacing insights right into their workflows. And what's really great about embedding with Looker is that you get to take advantage of the power of Looker's platform. So our scalability, our stability, our enterprise security. You get all of that for free when you embed. And to give you an idea of how our customers embed today, some of you embed Looker content into internal tools, like your team Salesforce app, for example, so you could see a customer's spending over time right alongside their account information. And then we also have other customers that are embedding Looker content externally, so maybe into your company's website or into a customer portal. And we even have customers that are choosing to monetize their data by embedding Looker. And as you can see here, some of our customers are even charging different price tiers depending on how complex the embed is. So maybe with just a simple embedded dashboard, that's a really cheap price tier. And for something more expensive, you get embedded explorers, you can build reports, you can do scheduling and include actions and alerting. And our customer Up Sso is an example of somebody that's doing this today. So they're charging a premium price tier to drive upgrades by embedding Looker. And to give you an idea of what that spectrum really looks like, so this shows you an image of what a really simple embed would look like, right? You take like a Looker dashboard and you embed it into a web page. Whereas this is a little bit more of a complex embed experience. So you're embedding Looker content, but then you're using our SDKs and our APIs to build up navigation around it and including other little widgets also alongside your embed. So that kind of gives you an idea of the spectrum. And for the rest of today's session, we're going to be focused on that more simple embed. Which leads me to what Danny will be demoing. So to give you a preview, so Danny's going to start by talking to you about setting up your embed authorization and security. Then he's going to get into placing your embed content on your web page. And then talking about actually customizing your embedded content. And finally, if we do have time, he'll get into an advanced use case and he'll talk about how you can actually react to embed user events. And with that, I will pass the mic to Danny for a demo.
Thank you, Lindsay. Let me wake up my machine here. Alrighty. So yes, so I would like to show you two scenarios for how to embed Looker into your own web applications. And by far the simplest, most straightforward way is what we call private embed, where you're literally taking the Looker UI and cramming it into a box that's on your web page. And that also has the presumption that when web visitors are viewing your page, they will go in and then log in into Looker using their Looker account credentials. Okay? And so let's say as a scenario that you come in, that we're a sales company for online marketing, online sales, and we need to keep track of inventory and shipping and returns. And let's say the warehouse has a little web app that they use for that. And what we want to do is we want to take metrics from Looker that's analyzing our data and maybe doing projections about inventory shortfalls and so forth. And we want to drop that into this web app, our internal web app, that our warehouse manager is already using. And this is really about taking the metrics and the analytics from Looker and putting it right in the place where your decision makers need it, the proximity to where they do their work. And in this example, we will say that we came in one morning and our director of development gave us a HTML template and says, this is the page I want you to use, and I wanted you to put a dashboard right here, which will be my excuse for having the world's ugliest website. So here's where we want to put the dashboard. There's a banner, there's a sidebar over here with menus that are stubbed out. And switching over to our code, watch out, we're showing code here. This is our little HTML template. There's our box that we're going to put the dashboard into. And so the first thing with doing private embed is we need to tell Looker that it's OK to show Looker content when some other website is asking to embed it. Otherwise, any third party could come along and say, yeah, put the Looker stuff here and we'll see what comes up. So you don't want to do that. So Looker by default will say, no, we do not show content on anybody else's website unless that domain name is in the embed domain whitelist. So I'm going to the Looker instance here. This is a local instance I use for dev. And in this domain whitelist, the web app that we're building is on alice.com on port 3000 on this machine. OK, so we update to give that to the Looker instance. So that's step one. Step two is because we want Looker to allow the user login screen in that embed context, we need to turn off this thing called same origin protections. Now, if you're not doing embed, you probably want to leave this protection enabled, and that is the default when you do a new Looker install. But when we're doing embed, we want to have this capability. So we will disable this protection, which is already done. And then these other items at the bottom don't have anything to do with private embed. We'll come back to them later. So for private embed, we need to add our web app domain to the domain whitelist. We need to set the same origin disabled. And we will switch back to our app development environment. Sorry? OK. What does what do? OK, so the same origin protections, normally Looker will, if this is enabled, it will not allow the Looker login screen to be in an iframe at all, ever. Because in some situations, that could be used as a phishing attempt to scrape people's username and password. And if you're not doing embed, then you probably ought to turn that off. But if you are doing embed, you need to have that turned on for this particular use case, OK? So here's our little HTML. And then Julia Child style, I pulled the roast out of the oven. And here's the next page that we're interested in. So this is private embed. And I've dropped in an iframe element. And the dashboard that we want to show here is, bang, bang, my handy dandy dev dashboard. It's got all sorts of really ugly stuff on it. And the key point here is that this is the URL up here for this resource, this dashboard. The key part is basically dashboard/6. There's also some filters out there. I don't care about that. So we'll take that dashboard/6, and we're going to put that into this source property. So there's our self-signed HTTPS is required. Looker.com:999, which is the port for the local instance. And the only thing that I'm going to modify in that URL, there's the dashboard/6, is I'm going to put a /embed in front of it in the path. And that tells Looker that, yes, this really is an embed context. Please set things up as appropriate for embed. And the last piece, this is in conjunction with that other bit, that this is telling Looker again, we do want to have the login screen shown. Now, what would happen if someone comes to your website and has not logged into the Looker UI before? Then the embed box without this thing would say, 401 not authorized. With the allow login screen equals true, that says, oh, they don't have any cookies, I don't know who they are, let's show the login screen, let them type it in. Okay, so this is needed. And let's see what this looks like. So I've got my little handy dandy, hello Julia Child, and bing. Hey, it's prompting us for a username and password. All righty. I do that. And here is our dashboard in our website. So more or less, we're done. Okay? So this is a great way to present your analytics, your Looker data, your data through Looker, to an internal audience, your directors, your line of business managers, your warehouse supervisors or shift managers, for example. But what if you wanted to present this data to a much larger audience, to your customers outside of your organization, or to the general public because you're showing how you're using public contributions or something like that. Having each of those users visiting your website have to go create or do some sort of Looker login, probably not a scalable, not a really maintainable thing. So private embed would not be well suited to that kind of scenario. So for this scenario of reaching a larger audience, to send this information out to a larger audience, we're going to use Sso Embed, which is a different kind of embed. It needs a little bit more configuration, but it gives you a whole lot more capabilities. Okay? So Sso Embed is all about this URL that you create, very similar to the URL that we put into the iframe. But again, we want to tell Looker, we want to enable the Looker server to distinguish between a request that is from some evil.com and they want to fish for stuff out of our Looker instance versus our own web app. No, we're legit. Show it to us, please. How do we prove that it's legit? We take that URL and on our web app server, we sign it with a secret, a digitally cryptographically strong signature. And that's included with that URL, so when it's presented to the Looker server server says, well, I don't know who you are, but the signature, no, it says signature checks out, so okay, we trust you because you must know the secret. So this is the crypto signature authentication for Sso Embed. To set up Sso Embed, we go back to the Looker instance and back to the admin page for Embed. And we're going to be looking at those other items at the bottom of the page. So we still need to have the embed domain whitelist because any request that's coming from a domain that is not on the whitelist is immediately rejected by the Looker server. So in both scenarios, you still have to have the whitelist. We've done that. Same origin present policy doesn't matter. The embed authentication, this is referring to the SSO URL. It can be turned off on your Looker instance, and it is off by default. You need to turn it on to enable this functionality. And then you also need to create an embed secret on your Looker instance. And there's a little button over here for reset secret. Now for security reasons, you've probably seen this with AWS keys as well. It follows the practice of show it to you when we create it and then never show it again. And it's frustrating, I know, because I've been wrestling with it all weekend. But I'm not going to reset it here. But essentially, when you hit the reset, it will present the key. You need to capture that and store it in a safe place. Do not put it into source code. Do not put it into version control, because that can be seen by who knows who. So I have captured this earlier, and I cut and pasted it into a configuration file. So now we're getting into the Looker Embed Sdk, which is something new since join last year, so pay attention. The Embed Sdk comes with a TypeScript, JavaScript library to help you automate a number of these steps, and it also comes with a ready-to-run demo. You provide a couple of configuration environment things like the embed secret, the name of your Looker instance, and the domain name of your own web app. So this is the embed secret, and you can copy it all you want to because you can't reach it on my machine anyway. Yeah, don't post the embed secrets for Looker instances out there in the cloud. So we've set this environment, and this is making it available to the Embed Sdk. The second thing about the Embed Sdk, or Sso Embed in general, is we're not telling Looker to log in a particular person who's already got a Looker account. That defeats the whole purpose of this exercise. We want to log in folks that don't have a Looker account. So Sso Embed can actually define and create a a synthetic embed user for the purposes of this embed session. And you can describe, you can set up names for them, you can set up their groups, and this configuration file in the Embed Sdk demo is an example of the types of things that you can control. You can set the permissions. So this user for this embed session will have access to data. It will have the ability to explore, to go into the Explore UI. And it will also have access to the IMDb and the FAA models on my machine, on this Looker instance. Okay? And then the last bit is, here we are with our HTML. And this is loading this Embed Sdk JavaScript module, which we put in the name demo.js. That's our application object. And again, we still have this div down here called demo dashboard box. This is where the dashboard needs to go. And then on the load event for this page, we're saying when everything else is loaded, when the JavaScript is loaded and all these other pieces are done, then go call over to our app object and call a function called show dashboard, which is something that we wrote because we want to orchestrate a couple of different things there. And the parameters for that are the ID of the dashboard that we want to show and where we want to put it in the box. So we want to put it here. And we can follow that, see where that goes. And so this is our JavaScript, TypeScript application object for the Embed Sdk. First thing that it does when it loads is it calls the Looker Sdk, Embed Sdk, and initializes it. And we need to tell it what the name of our Looker host is, selfsignlooker.com. And we need to tell it what endpoint to call on our web server to sign a URL. You do not want to have your embed secret running around in your browser JavaScript because too many eyes are possible there. The embed secret is extremely powerful and needs to be protected. So you want to put that on your web server away from prying eyes and use your server to do the URL signing and give that to your web app to then pass along. And that's what the Embed Sdk demo does right out of the box. So we already have an auth endpoint set up. And here's our demo app. Here's this show dashboard function that we were calling earlier. It takes the ID, it takes the container, and it then goes and internally it calls the Looker Embed Sdk to create a dashboard HTML embed element for the Looker instance's dashboard of a given ID. Number 6 is the number we passed in. This is doing all of the heavy lifting. You'll notice in here we're not talking anything about iframes. Internally, it will create the iframe. But we went down this path of defining the Looker Embed Sdk in this fashion so that we can abstract the work that you do away from the particular implementation detail called iframe. Because someday in the future, we'd like to be in a place where you don't need an iframe anymore. And this code should work just fine, even though we've changed the entire implementation. Okay? So this is preparing your code, your applications, in a future-proof sort of way. We're abstracting things for you. So we create the dashboard object. We add it to that container HTML element. We attach a CSS class name to it. And then we say build all the HTML stuff that needs to go with this. And then connect to it, because the Embed Sdk also provides bidirectional message passing for you. You just call a method and bing, it shows up on the other side. It also will do the domain name checking that needs to happen. When you receive a message across domains, it's really the receiver's responsibility to double check that it came from the right place. And if you forget to do that, anybody can get into your app. So we do that for you. And then after all this stuff is done, this is using asynchronous promises and so forth. When this is all done, we capture the embed dashboard object and we stash it away because we're going to come back to that later. We're going to use it later. And if anything blows up here, then we'll capture that exception and we'll log it out to the console, the browser console. Okay? Yeah. So what does this look like? We'll switch to our view and hit the next page, and bada bing, bada boom. So this looks an awful lot like the dashboard we just saw. But what this embed user is able to do is different from what I was able to do when I was logged in as myself, right? that there's only one option here, explore from here. Remember in those permissions, explore was included. If you take out that permission, that menu doesn't show up. So you can tune what the user experience is here not by managing the permissions and so forth in the embed user. OK, so this is an embedding scenario, which is similar to the private embed earlier, but this one we can present to a large audience. Your web application is completely in control of defining what this embed user has ability to see, what they can do. You can define, if you determine that the website visitor to your web app is customer A, then you want to give them access to the models for customer A, and that's it. And if you determine that the visitor visiting your web app is customer B, you can give them access to the models for customer B, and they cannot see the models of customer A. This is the way Looker model security was built. So you're taking advantage of the governance that you built into Looker, and you can take advantage of that and keep those populations completely isolated from each other, even though this app is essentially facing the public. Your web application has control of what to do and how to handle your users. So what if we would like to modify, to have our web app poke at this thing and change some things that are going on? You notice we have a filter here for Texas, and this single value tile over here is showing the number for Texas. Wouldn't it be neat if we could change that filter without having to reload the entire page? And the answer is we can absolutely do that. So I will come over here and add a selector to our HTML. What was that? And then come back into here and uncomment some code that was already set up. Ba-ding. So what this is doing is that when we construct this dashboard, we're also going to go find that state selector control, and we're going to add an event listener to it. And whenever that thing changes, we're going to go get our app dashboard object and call update filters on it. And what this was doing for us is it's going to send a message over using browser post message, and it will change the state filter to a value, which is the value that's in the selector, TX, CA, AK, whatever. And immediately after we do that update filters, we also are going to tell the dashboard to go run the queries again. The update filters doesn't auto-run the queries because you may want to update a bunch of stuff in different calls. So it would be very wasteful to do the run at that point. And ta-da, here's that selector. And if we select Alaska, bing, it has rerun the queries and redisplayed, and there was no screen flicker. If we had our web app modify the iframe.source property to a different URL that has filters on it, the entire page will reload. And there's some expense in doing that. But by sending messages, we can reload that content or tell the Looker UI to reload the content without screen flicker. So definitely think about using messages over any other technique. And as was mentioned in earlier presentations today, we are going to be expanding the messages that we are providing, the things that you will have ability to play with in your web apps. So the last thing, very quickly, what if we wanted, so this is taking an activity, a user click in my web app, and modifying the embed context. What about the other way around? What if the user clicks on something in the embed context? Can we find out about that and react to it? And the answer is yes, of course. And the way we do that, first of all, I'm going to go uncomment this thing right here, which is just putting a div out there in the HTML, which is going to be the dumping ground for some state information. And then coming into here, a couple more lines to uncomment. This is, again, when we modify, when we construct the dashboard element, we're going to attach some event listeners to it. We're going to say, listen for the dashboard run start, and when we get that, go dump the text running into the dashboard state HTML element. And we're going to listen for dashboard run complete. And when we get that, put done into that HTML element. And then the last one here is we're going to listen for drill menu click events. And in this particular case, I've got a handy function here which will cancel the event. So this is another big improvement from last join or last Looker events where we've rolling these things out. We now are able to intercept and replace the default behavior that Looker would normally do. So normally when you click on a drill menu, normally when you click on a drill menu, this is going to actually go open a modal page and show you the drill link, the drill data and so forth. But now that we've hooked up these events, I can click on this, and this records the fact that we received it via click and we killed it. So you can say, I want to know about this event, this menu click, and don't do the Looker thing. I'm going to go do this instead. You could have this open other pages in your web app. You could have this send off an email saying, hey, your product return, the return rate on your products is going through the roof. What's wrong with your product? The other. So we can change the filter. Watch the box over here. We changed the filter to California. It says running, done. So again, this is showing the query has been out and the query has been completed. Okay. So this is what I wanted to show you today was the private embed and then this Sso embed. And this is really a lead-in to some sessions tomorrow with John Castor and Brian Weber, where they will be going into depth on how to customize and how to manipulate the embed context even further. So they're moving further and further down that spectrum, that gradient of experience and control. The private embed is a large grain macro kind of thing. You drop it in and you're good. But there aren't quite as many knobs and controls on that. And this is moving down the spectrum to having more control. Lindsay?
Awesome. That was great.